Okay, we're going to get started for our last session of the day before we move to the demos this evening. So my name's Jeff Inman, and I'm the Associate Dean for Research and Faculty at the Katz School of Business. I'm going to introduce two people. I'm going to introduce Carrie Liana, who is the Director of our Center for Healthcare Management, and she'll talk a little bit about that and also about our new Executive MBA that is co-branded with UPMC, and she's also the academic director of that, and she's also the George H. Love Professor of Organizations and Management. Before I bring her up here, though, I just wanted to give a shout out and thanks to and welcome or congratulations to Bruce and his team for putting together such a wonderful conference. It's we were all helpers, but Bruce was the mover and shaker on this. Let's give Bruce some appreciation. I promised I wouldn't do that, but right, that's right. You had me at open bar, Bruce. That's right. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Carrie. Then I'll come back up and introduce Evan.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm not going to speak too long because this is advertised as a session about the Innovation Institute. I actually don't work with the Innovation Institute all that much, although I'm anxious to learn more about it. But I was asked to talk a little bit about our Executive MBA program in healthcare that the Katz School of Business and UPMC are doing. Let me see if my slides are going to work here. Yeah. We, a couple of years ago in the Katz School, that we really set as an objective that we were going to be a national center of excellence for management training and research in healthcare. And we've done a variety of things, and I'm just going to tell you about some of these so that you're aware of them. One is that we have several dual degree MBA programs with pharmacy, with public health, with social work. We have one in the works with nursing. We also have a lot of faculty that are involved in research in healthcare, much of that through the Center for Healthcare Management. We do a lot of executive training programs. We've been running for the past 9 years the Marshall Webster Physician Leadership Program. We also do an international healthcare program, et cetera. And the new initiative is what I've been asked to just say a few words about, and that's the Executive MBA in Healthcare program. And this is a program that started this year in May of 2017. Let me say a few words about the center before I get into the Executive MBA program. The center was established in 2009. It's a joint center between the Katz School and the School of Medicine. And our mission is really to develop and also disseminate research and knowledge on the challenges in healthcare delivery as well as improvements to health and well-being. So we do two things. One is we facilitate interdisciplinary research, and second, we try to develop training programs and executive programs that apply these research findings and disseminate them. The research itself, we have 14 faculty affiliated at the Katz School and also several of our colleagues in medicine. We have a variety of supported activities, and you can see some of the educational programs we've done just in the last couple of years. The last one is really what I want to focus on, the Executive MBA in Healthcare. And this is one that, this is an 18-month program. It's a 48 credit program. We have a core curriculum in the MBA, and they also do a 6-credit practicum and several electives. We started this, as I said, in May of 2017. They'll graduate the first class in December of 2018. We really see this as having a very wide geographic footprint in that we have in-class sessions once a month on Friday and Saturday, and then we have directed online content in between. Our first class was largely located, I would say most of them were within 100 miles of Oakland here, and we see as in the next few years that geographic footprint is really going to broaden. As part of the program, they do a research practicum project. Some of you were at our breakout session this morning, but this is something that we think really adds value both to the individuals that are enrolled in the program and the organizations that they work for. They do a 6-credit research project. You can see kind of the oversight and the timeline. The deliverables are a consulting report to sponsors and faculty. And these are examples of some of the research projects that are being done right now. And you can see they range across a lot of different areas in healthcare. Some of them are very much technology driven, some of them not as much technology driven. And again, there's probably about twice as many as I've listed here, but this is just to give you a flavor for the kinds of projects that are being done. Our value proposition is that I'm in a business school, so we talk about ROI, or return on investment, and we really see a return on investment for individuals in terms of their career enrichment, but we really see an ROI for employers as well in terms of bringing leadership training and business analytics to their organizations in addition to these practicum consulting projects. But the main, I guess, driver, at least from my own interest in this, is Jeff said I wear a couple of different hats and already have a day job, so this is kind of something that I do from my heart, and it's really to kind of think about how we can merge what we know of the analytics and some of the skills and knowledge that we have in other industries and in other organizations and in business more broadly and management, and how we can use that to improve the delivery of healthcare and the healthcare system as a whole. Our inaugural class, that at this point about 2/3 of the people in the first class, again, that just started in May, are at UPMC. UPMC is a co-sponsor of the program, but you can see we also have people from other big systems, Casella, Geisinger, et cetera. About 2/3 of the people in the program are medical doctors from a variety of different specialties, and this is also a program for people kind of that have some years of experience. So it's an executive level program as opposed to something for people just out of their undergraduate or their medical school training. And that's really all I have to say. I'm happy to answer any questions. You're welcome to get in touch with me if you think that you might be interested in this program, but I just wanted to give a shout out to it, and I appreciate the time that you let me do that.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. So now I want to introduce our speaker, and Evan Fasher, and he is currently the interim director of Pitt's Innovation Institute. In his role, Evan oversees a comprehensive suite of services for the various innovators around Pitt, from protecting intellectual property to the commercialization of new discoveries through licensing and/or new enterprise development. In addition, in this role, Evan manages a collection of educational programming, mentoring, and networking for Pitt faculty, students, and partners. Over the past few years at Pitt, the Innovation Commercialization Organization that Evan was overseeing prior to this current role has obtained almost 1,000 invention disclosures, executed 383 licenses, and obtained 248 issued patents, and spun out 39 new companies based on university technology, and they received a prestigious NSF, was it I-Corps? Yeah, I-Corps Site Award. Most recently, Evan was president of Siren RX Therapeutics, a private clinical stage company developing novel drug therapies. Before that, Evan worked at Bayer Healthcare's medical device division as general manager of its Pittsburgh interventional business. During his tenure there, Evan also oversaw a corporate strategy group that twice received Malcolm Baldrige award-level reviews in addition to running the M&A team. Busy guy. He's quite the multiplexing fellow. Evan started his career as senior manager of business development at the biotech company Athersys, where he was a business development leader, creating partnerships with global pharmaceutical companies. Evan holds a PhD in human genetics from the University of Pittsburgh, and the only blemish I saw in Evan's stellar Vita here is that he has an MBA from Case Western Reserve rather than the University of Pittsburgh, so, but that's okay. And a BS from the University of Miami. So welcome, Evan. Thank you.
I'd like to start by thanking Bruce for the opportunity to talk to you today while I try to get my slides up and running. I'm also happy to see as many folks here, given that we're past 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, so I appreciate you sticking with us and watching us present today. All right, here we go. So again, my name is Evan Fasher. I'm currently the interim director of the Innovation Institute, which means I'm going to have the interim title for, who knows, 12 months, 24 months, the way things typically work in the organizations here. Prior to that, I've been at Pitt for about 4 years now, and most of that time has been spent overseeing the innovation commercialization arm of the university. So the focus of what I'd like to talk with you about today is from campus to commercialization. Basically, how on Pitt's campus do you move from idea to the marketplace? And to do that, I wanted to start by level setting on, when we think about commercialization, how do we think about innovation, or what is an innovation in a commercial setting? I'll then talk to you about technology transfer in general, and then talk specifically about how things have evolved here at the university. So when I'm talking about innovation in this context, I'm looking at it purely from a commercialization view. I'm looking at it from the customer's view, in that we have to deliver and create something that actually provides value for an end user. And it has to provide value for a company that's actually going to take that product and move it to market. In this setting, when I'm thinking about innovation, it's not being creative or developing some widget that may or may not help somebody at the end of the day. It's really the connection of an idea, connection of something that was developed to a market need, and that market need has to provide some kind of financial return for somebody. Again, this is purely looking at innovation from a commercialization perspective, but our role on campus is to really do that. And we do this because the majority of new product services fail within 1 year of reaching the market. So the question is really, what's the main reason why this happens? Is it because we guessed the wrong cost of goods? Is it because we thought we had the wrong market size? Is it there were terrific regulatory hurdles? And the reality is that the vast majority of products fail because the customer didn't want it. This is the same at small companies and large companies. You work on something for years and years and years, and what's the one thing that you forgot to do? You forgot to ask an end user, did they actually need whatever this thing was that you've produced? We see that in industry settings. We see that a little bit more often in academic settings, because in institutes like this, we're really focused on basic research. The beauty is, if you have basic research, or you have some kind of research that turns into a commercial product. But those things always don't overlap. And I'll talk to you in a little bit of how, at the Innovation Institute, we try to help identify and move those opportunities forward that do connect with a need. So I'm going to give you a quick story around the concept of not meeting a market need, or not addressing a customer pain point by a product that was actually codenamed Ginger, and it was launched in 2011. So there you see the folks on the screen that talked about the product, people that you may have heard about. Steve Jobs said that this was going to be as big as the PC. Jeff Bezos said, you have a product so revolutionary, you'll have no problem selling it. And then John Doerr, an extremely famous investor, said, this is going to be more important than the internet. So the problem was that there wasn't a connection to the market, wasn't a connection to the customer, and what the product was the Segway. So this was going to be replacing all cars. This was going to be the primary mode of transportation by everybody in the United States, across the world. And did it happen? No. Where would you see this in two places? You see the Segway in the mall, and you see it on some tours in some major cities where you can go up and down the Mon or the Allegheny River and see what's happening in Pittsburgh. Do the same thing in DC. That's the main market for this product. It never turned out to be as revolutionary as the original inventors had hoped. And that's because there is this need, we heard it a little bit earlier, you need to focus on a value proposition. And what is a value proposition? Well, it's where what the company is creating overlaps with what the customer actually wants. It doesn't sound like it's a complex thing, but big companies do that wrong. We can see on the slide, New Coke. It wasn't something that people wanted. How many people want chapstick that's flavored like Cheetos? Really, nobody. So this is a continual challenge that we have from a commercialization perspective, and that you have to create something that aligns with whatever it is that your customer is interested in. So that's my spiel on innovation and its tie specifically to commercialization. So now I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about technology transfer and what does that look like in a university setting. So up until 1979, every single federal dollar that went into any university, any invention that was created with that money, those inventions were owned by the federal government. So if you as an entrepreneur or an existing company wanted to get access to that innovation, you had to go down to Washington, D.C. and knock on somebody's door and say, hey, I want to license this thing. And you can imagine that if every single university in the U.S. has research funding from NIH or NSF or DOD, the number of those innovations that are sitting there are tens and tens of thousands. So in 1979 alone, there were 28,000 government-filed patents, and only 5% of those actually were licensed to a company. So all of that money comes from all of us. This is all taxpayer funding that's going in to support these grants and developing these technologies, and the challenge was that none of them actually got out of the federal government and became products. So what happened in 1980 was something called the Bayh-Dole Act by Birch Bayh and Bob Dole. What this did was this transferred ownership of those inventions from the federal government to the universities that oversee that research. So the same amount of funding came in from NIH and DOD and NSF. The only difference was that the federal government said, okay, university, you can retain title to those innovations, but you have to do a handful of things. You have to commercialize these things. You have to protect them from a patent perspective. You have to make sure that this federal funding is going to help society. So the positive of it was now you have entrepreneurs or companies that want access to these technologies can come directly to offices like ours on campus versus going down to K Street in DC and knocking on somebody's door and say, hey, I'm interested in patent application 3,331. Now they could read about something in a research paper, they can go to the university that had that paper come out of it, and then work with us directly. So it really pushed the ability to create these technologies and move them to market down to the university level. And in so doing, it created this whole entire industry called technology transfer, where every single major research university has an office like ours that works with for-profit companies who want access to technologies that are developed on campus. So technology transfer from a definitional perspective is really exactly what it's saying. It's that transition of an innovation from a research environment to a company, a for-profit company that can make it commercial. So in our world, really the steps that continue are there's research that's going on. The researcher lets our office know through an invention disclosure that they created an invention. Now, when we have that invention, we can decide how we're going to protect that. Is it something that's patentable? Is it something that's going to be copyright? Is it something that's going to be trade secret or know-how? Or is it something also that, we're not going to do anything with? We then have the opportunity on campus for these interesting opportunities to provide additional non-dilutive funding through contests that go on campus, like the Pinch contest, the competition that just happened, or through gap funding that we have, or through state funding that we have access to, a way to keep these things on campus as long as possible so that we can remove as much of the risk and make it easier for somebody else to take advantage of them from a third-party for-profit entity. We market the technologies, and then eventually we license them to a new company that we are involved with creating, or to an existing company, so that company can take the product to market. They are the companies that do the development part of the R&D equation, and then hopefully they're successful and the product hits the market and can eventually be sold and benefit society. Now, why do academic institutions do this? Well, one, we have federal compliance. We mentioned before this Bayh-Dole Act, which pushes down all these obligations to the university. In exchange for that, we are constantly reporting what we're doing with each of these inventions, so there certainly is a compliance-related issue. It's mainly because now we can provide some societal benefit. We have a cure for cancer that's sitting on the shelf or sitting in a laboratory. It's not going to help a single patient if it's sitting in that laboratory. It has to get out to a company that can make a product of it and sell it and provide it to that patient. So it really is focused on societal benefit. We do it because it provides an interesting way for faculty, staff, and students to interact with industry. It's a tool for recruitment and retention of faculty, staff, and students that are interested in participating in innovation or in entrepreneurship. And as importantly, it's a significant force for economic development. So over the last 30 years, more than 50% of the economy is driven by new companies that are created. The number of new companies, the number of new products, the number of jobs that are provided by technologies that have originally come from university setting is quite enormous. So some of the data here, I'll walk you through it, but in 2014 alone, 965 new products hit the market based on technologies that were originally developed inside of universities. Over the course of this whole Bayh-Dole Act, there have been over 4 million jobs created in the U.S. purely based on technologies that were created inside of universities. More than 80,000 U.S. patents have come from technologies created in different universities. The impact on the U.S. GDP at this point is over $1 trillion because you've created products, you've created jobs that really impact society. So to demonstrate that I'm not just kind of telling you a fairy tale here, here are some products that initially were created on university campuses. Have anyone in this room heard of Gatorade? Google? Those are all created on university campuses. So the story behind Gatorade, does anyone know where Gatorade was actually created? What university? University of Florida. University of Florida Gators. The football team was having trouble hydrating themselves, so an investigator on campus came up with a new drink full of electrolytes, provided it to their players, and then eventually it helped their players, but then eventually it was acquired by an outside organization. We've heard of Taxol. We've heard of human growth hormone. We've heard of Lyrica. I'm going to talk about Lyrica again in a few minutes. But these were all products that have significant societal benefit. They were all created through the use of federal funding, and they were initially developed on university campuses. So it can be done. And what I want to emphasize in the next slide or two, this is not revenue focused. We don't do this as a university because we're making money on it. We make very little money from these things. You have to be lucky enough to have one of these huge grand slam opportunities. So what I'm showing here is the number of licenses, active licenses by all universities over a given point in time. So if we look at that last column, in 2015 there were 44,000 active licenses between universities and for-profit companies. Out of those 44,000, only 222, or less than 0.5%, provided $1 million in revenue back to that university. And that's because the vast majority of these technologies that are such an early stage of development. We don't know what the intellectual property landscape is going to look like. We don't know who the management team may be. We may not even know what the real market is for the opportunity. And we need to provide this most risky technology to a third party who then may spend, if we're talking about a drug, may spend $100 million, $200 million and get to market a decade from now. So it's hard for us up front to say, give me $100 million if you're going to spend $350 million over the next decade and have a 99% chance that you're going to fail anyway, just based on the way clinical trials work. So again, this is based on societal benefit. And when revenue does come in, it comes in from that bottom gray bar is royalties. The vast majority of money that comes into a university from any of these activities is from royalties. And if we were in a life sciences organization and it takes a decade plus to get a product to market, it takes a long time to get that money in. And it's high risk money. If we spend 9 years with a product getting to market and it fails in phase 3 clinical studies, that gray bar doesn't exist because we're not going to get product royalties because it never hit the market. Some of the mischaracterization is this idea of equity in startup companies provides a huge amount of money back to universities. It really doesn't. That's that second line, that's that little tiny orange speck on those bar charts. So most of these things are from successfully getting a product to market and then the university having a small share of that proceeds from every single sale that's made. This is why you want that one-hit wonder. Lyrica. Over the time that Lyrica has been on the market, which is now, I'll tell you, it's a generic product, so I'll tell you the impact that that's had. Northwestern has received $2.3 billion in income from the sale of that product because they had a small percentage of every single dollar that was made on that product. This is not the norm, this is the outlier. And the challenge that this does also for universities is every single year Northwestern was getting a check for $300 million in royalties. It went generic last year. So their planned $300 million now went down to $30 million. And you can't easily say, well, I'm going to find another $270 million to fix that gap. You can't cut corners or cut expenses or put more money into the pipeline to get another $230 million back. It really is a lot of serendipity and a lot of good fortune that occurs. And this is all why when we do technology transfer, we do this licensing, it's focused on how do we transfer the societal benefit of the creation that was done on campus, off campus. So I'll talk a little bit about the Pitt experience and hopefully dispel some myths. So the goal of our organization, the university, is really when people think about innovation in Pittsburgh, what we would like them to think about is Pitt first versus that other university that's a couple blocks down the road. But really, the goal is how do we take the research engine that we have here and make people think about innovation and think about the University of Pittsburgh in the same sentence. In order to help do this, about 4 years ago, the Innovation Institute was created. So the Innovation Institute is really focused in three main areas: innovation, commercialization, student entrepreneurship, and providing entrepreneurial assistance. And I'll talk to you about some of these in more detail in a few seconds. But the focus is how do we create this culture of or environment or ecosystem of innovation and entrepreneurship on Pitt's campus to benefit not only our campus but also to benefit the region. So when we think about the different activities that go on at the Innovation Institute, we really serve as the hub of commercialization activities. Everything from overseeing the university's entire intellectual property docket, we oversee all licensing of university technologies, all new companies that are created based on university technologies. We have a whole collection of workshops and classes focused on innovation and connecting to market needs. Technology showcases, we run business plan competitions. We have a student accelerator called the Blast Furnace, which is the same set of learnings that we provide to faculty on campus. So every single service that we have, it's offered to faculty, staff, student. It doesn't make a difference if it was invented in a research lab or if it was invented in the dorm room. The goal is how do we create this culture of innovation and entrepreneurship and make it known that Pitt is interested in this and that Pitt is being successful in creating this kind of environment. And certainly a strong reason for this is with our new chancellor. This is a letter that Chancellor Gallagher published in 2015, really recentering the university to have a focus on moving more of research results to the marketplace. So we play a facilitative role in how do we commercialize research that's been created on campus? How do we make sure that we're providing economic growth to the region and to the U.S.? And how do we make sure that we're connecting with the business sector, that we're identifying new funding opportunities and new commercialization opportunities? To demonstrate his commitment to this, in 2016, the Chancellor gave our organization $1 million in commercialization gap funding. So this is to take technologies that we think with the 5, 10, 25, or 50,000 extra dollars would push it over that line where someone would want to license it or a new company could be created on it. So this is not just kind of an idea. We've also put some internal dollars behind making this successful. So if we look at fiscal year 2017 alone, these are some of our main numbers. So at the university, we received 329 new invention disclosures. So anytime an inventor on campus uses research money to create something, we have an obligation to protect it and to commercialize it, and the only way that we know it actually exists is through this submission of an invention disclosure. Last year, we received 102 new U.S. patents on technologies created at Pitt. We did 146 licenses with third-party companies on technologies created on campus. We spun out 29 new companies, 15 based on university technology and then 14 based on student technology. And in total, we worked with about 2,000 different people on campus that were interested in moving their opportunities closer to market. So if we think about, so this is last year alone. I'm going to now show you the numbers since the Innovation Institute was created, just to give you a sense of the enormity of the translation opportunities that we've had on campus. So over 1,200 invention disclosures. Over the last 3.5 years, over 1,200 new inventions created with this federal resources on campus disclosed for us to protect and move towards commercialization. Over 300 new patents have been issued over that period of time covering technologies that have been created on campus. We've done nearly 500 licenses for technologies to third-party companies, either existing companies or new companies. And we've spun out, just based on Pitt technology alone, we've spun out over 50 companies. Over the 4-year period of time, the companies that we've spun out have already raised close to $100 million in venture capital. If we look at the last 5 years across all the companies we've spun out historically, those companies have raised almost $400 million in venture capital. So we're not just spinning out companies just for the sake of spinning out companies, we're spinning out companies that actually have the ability to bring in significant sums of venture capital dollars. If we look since we've started doing this in the late 90s, we've spun out about 153 companies, which in total have raised about $1.1 billion in venture capital. So this myth that the university doesn't do a good job at commercializing opportunities or spinning out companies or licensing technology, I can tell you is really not true. Some of our recent success stories here are a couple of companies based on cancer immunotherapy technologies that were developed here. Oncorus, their Series A round in 2016 was $57 million. That's a pretty big Series A investment. Western Oncolytics, they spun out around that same time. They already have a huge equity stake by Pfizer to help them move their technology closer to market. We do the same on the medical device side. A-Lung has raised over $100 million to date. Cohere Medical has raised $120 million to date. And this is only 4 examples of things on the life sciences side. We have a whole history of these kinds of successes across the entire portfolio. As importantly, kind of the processes and the programs we put in place, we get judged by third parties to see how well do we do at technology commercialization. Here is a report done by the Milken Institute that ranked Pitt, out of all universities in the U.S., number 24 for technology commercialization. So we're really, again, not doing that bad a job of taking things developed on campus and moving them towards commercialization. However, it all starts with an invention. Unless we know that an invention has been created, there's nothing that we can do to be helpful in moving that technology closer towards commercialization. There's nothing we can do to help patent the technology. There's no funding that we can provide to help move things closer to market. Over the last 3 years with the different programs we've had, we've been able to provide researchers on campus with about $12 million of non-dilutive capital to move their technologies closer to market. If we don't know that the technology exists, there's no way that we can be of any service. But the challenge always is, how do we make sure that we're moving forward with innovations that are connected to some kind of commercialization pathway? Because typically what we see on campuses is a lack of understanding of who is the customer for this. Who is, at the end of the day, who actually wants this? So it's going to be pretty hard to sell a blue pen to someone that wants to buy a red pen. So how early on do we determine if something is going to make sense to put our investments into, or is it something that's going to be less important? And the concepts that we have are really, how do we increase our odds of success? How do we look at an entire landscape and underneath that find where that buried treasure lies? So over the last 3 years, we've put in place a whole collection of different programming on campus. Classes, immersive workshops, competitions that are all focused purely on helping people on campus move their ideas from concept towards commercialization. Be they traditional classes where it's just an lecture-based setting, be they flipped classrooms where we're doing NSF I-Core work, and I'll talk about that more in a second. How do we get people involved with this? Because all these opportunities allow people to get A, educated, but also B, if they're interested in commercialization, there's an entire organization here that does nothing other than try to help move your idea with you towards the marketplace, if you're interested in moving towards commercialization. So one of the programs that we focus most on is this Pitt Ventures approach, and I'm not going to go through all the details, but It is very much focused on customer discovery, speaking to customers to help them help you understand what the value proposition is. What is the pain point that they have, and how does the thing that you've invented address that pain point? Again, if you're creating something that doesn't address a need that somebody has, it's really going to be difficult to commercialize it. So the validation for the approach that we've been taking was first through the NSF I-Corps. So the NSF I-Corps is a program that was started about 5 years ago by the National Science Foundation, who, after spending $6 billion a year in research, realized that most of the things they were funding weren't being commercialized. So they created a whole different set of programming for universities to apply from a process perspective to be labeled an I-Corps or an Innovation Corps. We were the 36th university to get that designation, and we've actually, their 3-year awards, we just renewed our 3-year award. We're only the 12th university in the U.S. to get this designation for a second time. Other universities such as MIT are on that list as well, so we're in pretty good company from a process perspective. And again, this whole slide and the slide that I showed you before, all these programs are 3.5, 4 years old. These are all programs that were created with the Innovation Institute, which is one of the reasons why over the last 4 years we see a 60 or 70% increase in the number of innovations that are creating into new companies, or the number of patents that we're receiving. So we have a whole kind of continuum that we work with folks to go from their innovation all the way past SBIR grants, and we have a whole host of experience in doing this successfully with organizations or with companies that were originally created on campus based on technologies that were created on campus. So when we look at this from a more value proposition perspective, we always get asked, well, why should we be doing this? What's in this for Pitt? So certainly part of it is around how do we create this culture of innovation on campus. We're a learning organization, so how do we provide a really unique set of experiential learning for faculty, staff, and students that are interested in taking initial ideas and seeing how they apply to the market. Networking, connecting faculty, staff, and students with big businesses, with angel investors, with venture investors, with service providers in the region or outside the region. It certainly is a badge of honor for the university from a notoriety perspective to be associated with innovation and entrepreneurship. We talked about faculty retention and staff retention, and also there's unique sources of funding. But again, the most important piece is this focus on societal benefit. I want to end with a quick anecdote about one specific project that we worked on with the Human Engineering Research Lab. So this is a powered wheelchair. This is for folks that don't have the ability to walk and they may not have much function of their arms. This is basically a huge battery pack underneath this wheelchair that, using that joystick, the person can be mobile, can move themselves around. Now the challenge with this is that this is a huge battery. So what the folks at Hurl actually did was they developed the same kind of wheelchair, except using air power. Not a single electronic component is in this wheelchair. So this is called New Chair. We actually licensed this out of the university. So when we think about societal benefit, what do we think about? We have a young man here who could never go to a water park because this big batteries and water don't really mix all that well, right? So we have this air-powered chair that this gentleman can now go and he can do things before like he can never do. And again, are we going to make $200, $300 million a year in royalties on this? No. But look at what we do. We have someone who, for the first time in their life, can say that it felt like that he could run around because he can play in a water park where he couldn't do that before. And all that is from innovations that have been created here on our campus. But again, it creates that we need an invention that we know about, and we've worked with Rory Cooper and his group on this over the last 4 years to go from concept to licensing to production to certainly providing this societal benefit. And we do get royalties in product sales. So this is really an example of how do we put all these pieces together that we do. So again, to dispel that myth that the University of Pittsburgh is not kind of in the top class of innovation and entrepreneurship and commercial translation. Hopefully over the last 20 or so minutes you've gotten the sense that we are changing that dramatically. That's all I had. And if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to take them. Going to make my job too easy if I don't have to answer any questions. Go ahead. I think there's a microphone, or if you can.
I'm really excited to hear about this. I actually do media, and our first movie was on polio and Jonas Salk, and as you may know, that was an example of tech transfer where he gave away the patent because he said it would be like patenting the sun.
I said that we have one, you get one of these chances, and that was one of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But that was the beginning of all
Yes.
this. So we've done a movie on Starzl that you're involved with and these other things, but here also I see a lot of apps and things that are more project-based than company-based. And I know it's been kind of a challenge even with movies and media. Is that a new model, or are there examples of apps and other things that
Yes.
are not as company-based but more
They can,
project-based?
yeah, so it doesn't have to be new company based, it could be, so we have an app right now we developed through the School of Pharmacy that if you go to a number of local Giant Eagles, they're actually testing them there. So this is a product that may be something that's in somebody else's portfolio, and that's fine. Most of our, I mentioned we did 146 licenses last year. 130 of them were to existing companies, only 15 of them were to new companies. So most of the things that we develop are going to, they're a piece of a product in somebody else's portfolio.
And one follow-up, which I know I've had these conversations. So you have an app developer over here, or a media maker over here, and a doctor over here, and everyone's trying to figure out, hey, do you do websites? Do you do this? How do you coordinate it? Does your office help coordinate that, or is that kind of the job of people over here, and then they come to you?
If to the extent we know about it, we can, since we are kind of centrally located, we work with everybody on campus and off campus. As soon as we know about it, there's things that we can do to help put the pieces together.
Thank
Thank you. All right. Oh, one more. Go ahead.
With open source projects becoming kind of more common, what do you think about open source projects?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to find open source projects becoming more common, and I'm not sure how that works with like patents and this sort of realm. So
Sure.
can you blend them together, or if you can, how do you walk that line?
So we do a good amount of licensing of software technology. So a lot of times software, we're not going to get a patent on it, but we can get a copyright on it. So the first thing that we do when we have a disclosure focused on software, we do basically a software copyright checklist where the first set of questions are around what in there was developed internally versus what was open sourced. And for each of those open source items, we have to understand some of them have restrictions from commercial use. So if we're going to partner with somebody, we have to tell them ahead of time, hey, here's this 15% of code you're going to either have to do yourself or find another way to make it happen. So we do a lot of software copyright licenses as well, and it really ends up being us understanding from a diligence perspective what each of the pieces of code actually do, and we'll provide that party with whatever we can and let them know where there may be a little bit of challenges. Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time.
Wait, before you go in, I just want to, on behalf of the conference, unexpected gift.
Yes,
right?
thank you very much.
Thank you very much also for your presentation and letting people know about the Innovation Institute. I'm curious also to see what Leah Silverman is doing over here in the corner. Some of Leah's artwork has been moved downstairs that people could see and look at their leisure during the networking reception downstairs. We still have two more projects from Leah to come downstairs. Before I invite Dimitri to come back up here and also to present awards to the winners and describe the Games for Health Jam, I just want to remind people too to turn in their evaluation. There's a box near where you registered today, and just mark down your comments, what you liked today, what you'd like to see different, what we could do better for next year's conference. And so without further ado, I want to invite my friend and colleague, Dmitry Babichenko, a professor of practice in the iSchool here.
Okay, I'll be brief. I only made a few slides, and most of them are pictures. So last weekend, I had the opportunity to run an incredible event with students from all over the campus. It was called Games for Health, and before I tell you what Games for Health is, I would like to start by actually thanking all these wonderful people from all over the university who contributed to Games for Health. Dr. Rollman, without you, this event wouldn't have happened, but all these wonderful people who acted as advisors, who provided funding for the event, all the sponsors who came together and either gave money or donated in kind or donated a tremendous amount of time. Like a lot of things, the idea for Games for Health, involved alcohol, basically. So this kind of starts like a bad joke. What happens when a programmer and two pharmacists walk into a bar? On the right is Dr. Grieve, and on the left is Dr. Patel from the School of Pharmacy, my partners in crime in this. So literally we were in a bar drinking beer, and all of us play games, all of us do research, and some work with using games as behavioral interventions. And we were talking about Global Game Jam, something that actually takes place every year, and it's an industry event. And we're thinking, well, what if we make it a university event and actually have students from all over the university, from all disciplines, collaborate together and develop games specifically for health, for clinical interventions. So this ended up being a 24-hour event. And we kind of gave students broad categories of the kinds of themes that they could work with. And we started out actually Friday night, and we had a lot of our stakeholders, a lot of our mentors come in on Friday night and talk to students and present problems and explain what kinds of things could be solved by games. And then Saturday morning we kicked it off at 9 a.m. And pretty much throughout until 9 a.m. Sunday morning, we worked on the problems. Students, we had tremendous amount of retention, so we started with 13 teams and 11 stayed through the whole event. Actually, kind of like an interesting anecdote, one of the teams fell apart. They had two programmers who pretty much walked out in the middle of the night. They said they couldn't take it anymore. And this biology student, Andrew, got in his car and drove to Walmart in the middle of the night and bought a bed sheet. And came back, and with another undergraduate student from information sciences, Lionel, together they basically made this Twister-style game on a bed sheet. But what was amazing is that they didn't quit. They actually, even though they lost two key members of their team, they stayed through and they actually built something, which was phenomenal. So the deliberations trying to pick winners were difficult, and some heated arguments ensued, but finally we ended up picking 3 teams, and I'll actually award certificates to them in a second. But the first place was a game called Cystic Fiblaster, which was a cystic fibrosis game, and by the way, you'll be able to see demos for all of those games downstairs. The second place was a game called Las Vegas, which is designed to educate people about depression. And finally, this was the only analog game that won, 78, which is a game on making decisions associated with genetic health. So that being said, I'm just going to let this run in the background. We took a lot of pictures and a lot of videos. We also had a music break in the middle of the night, and we found out, I'm trying to find if Frank, right there, actually plays mean guitar. And as you'll see in one of the pictures, Dan over here cannot play ukulele. With that, let me actually invite the students who participated. So Allison Feathers. So think of this as a graduation ceremony. So, Haley Mook. So both of these wonderful ladies are from the School of Pharmacy. Dylan Furr. He's not here, but his information sciences, I'll give them the certificate on Monday. Andrew Merkwa, who is information sciences. And then Dan Justice, who is computer science. So this is the team that designed the cystic fibrosis game. Now for our second place, since you guys didn't take the first place, your certificates aren't as nice, but still are just as valuable. So Frank Pascolini, computer science. And then we have Nayana. What school are you in? Computer science. We also have Natasha, and I know you're here, I saw you earlier. Oh, engineering. We have Tom Blair, or Bear, sorry, Tom. English department. Colin Wolf, pharmacy. Lauren, who I don't think she's here. Oh, no, you are there, I'm sorry. Lauren is environmental sciences. We have Connor, who is also pharmacy. And Mark Paulson, he's not here. Okay. All right, so we'll give these two later, but I want to thank you guys. Thank you so much for participating in this. Thank you for staying through the entire event, and thank you for designing